Okay, so what we're talking about is complex conjugates, okay? So let's say we have A plus BI. Now you guys know that this is the complex number form, but we want to talk about what it's called when we find the complex conjugate. So the complex conjugate. Okay, I believe that's spelled right. Complex conjugate. That's what we want to find. Okay, so we have a complex number in the form of A plus BI, correct? So what we do, we actually have to, in order to find the complex conjugate, we change the sign of the imaginary number. So we have our real number A here, and we actually do this. We change the sign of our imaginary number. So if this is a plus, we're going to make this imaginary number minus. So it's going to be minus BI. Okay, let's look at another one here. If we have the complex conjugate of 4 plus 3i is basically saying this, 4 minus 3i. So all you're doing when finding a complex conjugate is just changing the sign of your complex number, okay? Or let's say the imaginary part, which is this part here of your complex number, okay? So let's get a chart going here. Let's get a chart going here. Let's say this is the number and this is this conjugate number, okay? So let's take it. Let's say we have 4 minus the square root of 2i, 2 times I. Okay. We want to find the complex conjugate of this. The complex conjugate of this number here is what? Well, this is the part that has my imaginary number attached to it. Now, sometimes you'll see this I in front of this square root, but anytime you see this is the square root of 2i is my imaginary part. So the complex conjugate of that would be 4 plus the square root of 2i. Okay, because basically what we're doing, we're changing the sign of our imaginary part. Okay, let's get another example here. Let's say we have 6 minus 6. Well, let's say 6 plus 4i. Well, we know that this is the let's find the imaginary part, which is what? The imaginary part is this right here. So we know where the imaginary part is. Now let's change the opposite of this sign here. Okay, so let's get the opposite of that sign, which will be what? The opposite of that will be 6 minus 4i. Okay, so that's basically how we're looking at this complex conjugate thing here. Now this is where some students get confused, but we want to cover this mistake before you get confused with it. Let's say we have minus 4i plus 6. Well, what we want to do, and before we find a complex conjugate, we want to always put it in the form of A plus BI. So this is not in the form of A plus BI because the imaginary part is coming first. We want it to come last, right? So what we basically need to do here is we need to switch the places of these numbers, right? Now once we switch the places, then we can put it in complex, we can find this complex conjugate, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Well, this needs to go first. 6 needs to go first. So 6, and then you put this in behind it. So the sign of this minus 4i. So it'll be minus 4i because you take the sign with it. Okay, so basically what we have is 6 minus 4i. Now this is in complex form because we have our A first and then our BI, right? And then we put this in its complex conjugate form by switching the sign of our imaginary number, of our imaginary part. So it'll be 6 plus 4i, okay? Don't ever make that mistake in doing it like this, and making it minus 4 minus 6, because that's wrong, okay? Let's do one more example of finding a complex conjugate. If we have minus root 2i plus 6, okay? Well, let's take a look at this here. Let's say what we'll do, we have to put it in complex form. So it'll be 6 plus 6, it'll be 6 minus root 2i. Then we change the sign of this imaginary number here, which will be 6 plus root 2i. And that would be the complex conjugate.